The first gen of Pokemon cards have not aged with the most grace compared to their modern counterparts. The game's power level in general was far lower back then and had a drastically different pace and feel. There weren't even item cards and supporter cards yet, just trainer cards. These trainer cards functioned like item cards, meaning you weren't limited to just one per turn. So starting off this list at number 10, we have Mr. Fuji from Fossil. This trainer card lets you choose a Pokemon on your bench and shuffle it and any cards attached to it into your deck. This card's effect is technically powerful, but it's arguably more powerful for your opponent than it is for you. You are removing your own Pokemon, and while it doesn't give up a prize card, you are still setting yourself back in tempo without any good printed benefit on the card. Shuffling back your own Pokemon is not typically a good thing. Pokemon such as Butterfree from 151 literally have this effect attached to an attack to shuffle back an opponent's Pokemon. You can technically save a Pokemon from being knocked out, or to reuse an effect that triggers when it enters. But it'd probably be better to use something like Scoop Up to return the card to your hand to have more free access to it. Mr. Fuji protects a card, but you're then required to either draw back into it or expend resources to try and search for that card again. And Scoop Up was printed in base set, meaning that Mr. Fuji was already outclassed before it was even printed. As if that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Fuji also only works on benched Pokemon, meaning you can't save your Pokemon in the active zone, even though they're the ones most likely to be in immediate danger. This was especially true in the Fossil era, where there was some bench damage with cards like Golem's Self-Destruct, but it was far from as prominent as it is today. So not only is Mr. Fuji worse than Scoop Up, it also is more narrow card in terms of targets. The only silver lining is that Mr. Fuji also shuffles back the attached cards, while cards like Scoop Up make you discard them instead. This is nice, but that small upside does not outweigh the several downsides when compared to other more robust options. That said, there is at least something to be gained from resolving this card, which is hard to say for most things ahead of it on this list. The only consolation is that it counts as an item card, although if it ever got reprinted for some strange reason, there's a chance it could be a supporter card, since it is a character like most other supporter cards. And if this had to be your only supporter card for the entire turn, it would be one of the worst cards in the game, period, let alone from this era. And at number 9, we have Gambler from Fossil. Gambler requires you to shuffle your hand into your deck and then flip a coin. If the result is heads, you draw 8 cards. But if the result is tails, you only draw 1 card. This card can be better than Professor's Research, or rather, just Professor Oak back in Gen 1 era. But the downside is pretty rough, with the best case scenario being just barely acceptable outcome of cycling a card, and every other outcome just resulting in straight up card disadvantage. Coin flips are quite common in the game, even in the modern era, with some competitive level cards like Crushing Hammer needing a successful coin flip to do anything at all. But why take the risk in the first place when playing Gambler when you could just play one of the various Professor Draw 7s, including the aforementioned Professor Oak from the previous set? Gambler asks you to use your singular trainer card for the turn to have a 50% chance of playing a slightly better version of a card you already probably have and use. The fail state is actively awful too, since going card neutral with your one trainer of the turn was a huge loss in tempo even back in the earliest days of the game, and that's the best case scenario. Its only card neutral of Gambler was the last card in your hand. If you had 1 or 2 cards already in hand when you played Gambler, you'd be forced to shuffle those back in to potentially just get 1 random card for your trouble. And that 1 random card could very likely be a basic energy and leave you with nothing to do on your turn. While it's true that you should only play cards like this or Professor's Research when you have little to no other cards in your hand to maximize value, sometimes you'll have a clunky 3 or 4 card hand that you want to replace, especially if you were hit with a judge effect the turn prior by your opponent. Other cards can unbrick you without a second thought though, whereas Gambler is, well, a gamble. So while the card does get points for flavor, it's a pretty strong argument for why gambling doesn't pay off. Come to think of it, maybe they were being intentional by making gambling much more risky and worse than just studying with a professor. Unfortunately, probably unintentional meta commentary does not give any bonus points, and still lands the card here amongst the worst of its time. And at number 8, we have Digger. You start by flipping a coin. If that coin is tails, it deals 10 damage to your active Pokemon. If it's heads, then your opponent flips a coin. If their coin flip comes up tails, your opponent does 10 damage to their active Pokemon. If they flipped heads, however, you flip again. This repeats until someone gets a tails. This convoluted effect essentially forces you and your opponent to play hot potato with each other. The problem is that you're the one who is at risk first, and just like with Gambler before, a coin flip's odds are inconsistent and swingy. Half the time you play this card, you will just instantly lose the first coin flip. And sometimes, if you get astronomically unlucky, you can sit there for minutes at a time just flipping coins back and forth, waiting for someone to finally miss. And all of this is just for 10 damage. The absolute bare minimum amount of damage an effect can deal in the game. This was small even by the standards of early Pokemon, and hardly worth using a whole card in your deck. If you're behind in prize cards and empty-handed, top decking this is basically a death sentence, especially since you have a decent chance of just hurting yourself instead. It dealing negligible damage is one thing, but the coin flipping required turns the card into an active chore that has little function, besides serving as a vehicle for art of a somewhat disturbing game of whack-a-mole. There's really not much else to say. It deals 10 damage to one active Pokemon at random, and makes you play an annoying little minigame. While there are far worse cards on this list from here, the fact that this card almost registers as harmless and annoying might be a harsher critique in its own right. And at number 7, we have Blaine's Gamble from Gym Heroes. This trainer card makes you discard any number of other cards from your hand to then flip a coin. If you get a heads, you draw twice that many cards. Following a bit of a trend with these last few entries, we have another card that has the wonderful downside of actively harming you half the time. This card can only give you actual card advantage if you discard 2 other cards. If you just discard 1, you'll draw 2, meaning you only replace the card you discarded and the Blaine's Gamble itself. Higher risk means higher reward, but the reward is not worth the price. It takes discarding 4 cards to even match Gambler in terms of payoff, and at least Gambler still draws you 8 cards even if you have nothing to lose. You could just play something as simple as Bill back in the day before it counted as a supporter card, or any of the other countless trainer cards that draw that have come out since. Heck, even cards from the same set vastly outclass Blaine's Gamble. Misty's Wrath lets you look at the top 7 cards of your deck and put 2 into your hand, then discard the rest. Instead of staking your entire life saving on a coin flip, you can go +1 in card advantage and look 7 cards deep into your deck in the process. And if you want a higher density of cards, there are options for that, like the aforementioned Professor Oak, that doesn't have any risk involved if you play it at the right time. Blaine's Gamble stands out from Gambler in that you can't really play around its downside. Gambler is awful, but at least there is a way to maximize the potential of its upside. Blaine's Gamble needs you to invest heavily and for a payoff that you're not all that likely to actually get. And at number 6, we have Minion of Team Rocket from Gym Heroes. This trainer card makes you flip 2 coins, and if both are heads, you choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and return it and all cards attached to it to their hand. If either or both of the coin flips are tails, your turn ends immediately. While we promise this is the last coin flip card in this list, this is also by far the worst of this era. 1 coin is bad enough, but it's a downside that is proven worth it if the card is good enough, or has upsides with or without winning the flip like Hypnotoxic Laser. But 2 coin flips is a bridge too far for even remote playability. Your odds of winning are only around 25%. And even if you do succeed, you get a much worse version of Gust of Wind. The best case scenario is sniping an evolution they've been setting up with energies, but you have to time it right while they're still not ready. Once their threat is in the active, Minion of Team Rocket won't be able to do anything to it. That means this card only works while you're actively ahead, or at best parity with the opponent who is setting up. That makes the coin flip fail state all the more brutal, since you'll end your turn before getting a chance to attack. Instead of removing your opponent's Pokemon, you'll lose the tempo and let them get ahead in the damage race, or finish setting up their threat. This card, designed to stop a setup and take out a threat before it's a real Pokemon, is going to help your opponent's setup by giving them a breathing room 75% of the time. The best thing you can say about Minion of Team Rocket is that it does objectively have an upside, even if it's a narrow one easily outclassed by the oldest of staple cards. And at number 5, we have Giovanni's Last Resort from Gym Challenge. This trainer card removes all damage counters from one of your Pokemon with Giovanni in its name. Then you discard your hand. Turns out Team Rocket is pretty bad at all levels of Chain of Command, as this card is leagues worse than the already terrible Minion of Team Rocket. Removing all damage counters is genuinely a powerful effect in some respects, in that we've only gotten a few cards that even do it, such as Pokemon Nurse. If this were just a complete heal, then this card would be nowhere near this list. Unfortunately, the card is nothing but problems from there. First, the card can only heal a Giovanni's Pokemon. There were only 15 legal targets for this card. There are Dark Pokemon and Team Rocket's Pokemon that have come out since, but there were exactly 15 Pokemon with Giovanni in their name in Gym Challenge, and that's all we ever got. Of those, 6 have 50 or less HP, like the absolutely flimsy Giovanni's Meowth. The highest HP is Giovanni's Nidoking at 120, one of only 3 Pokemon in the category to break triple-digit HP. This means that the card's upside is hard to take advantage of, since most of the cards it can target are fairly low HP Pokemon to begin with. And you really want to get as much value as possible from this card, considering its downside of discarding your entire hand. Sure, if you're empty-handed already, it won't matter, but this card absolutely throttles your game state for a momentary reprieve. Healing 30 to 40 damage off of Giovanni's Pinsir is not worth discarding a single card, let alone a full hand's worth. Even if you could target any Pokemon in the game, the card would still be unplayable with the downside that drastic. But with such a limited pool of viable targets, the card falls right into outright joke tier. The only real positive thing that could be said about the card is that it's quite evocative as a last resort, because you'd play just about any other card instead before this if you could. And at number 4, we have Maintenance from base set. This trainer card shuffles 2 cards from your hand into your deck, then draws a card. It's important to note that you can't play this card if you don't have the cards to shuffle back. There's no clever play to get around this cost. You must have at least 2 other cards in hand to even play this. And your reward for that restriction? Going -3 in card advantage. This card's so low because as bad as many of these previous cards were, they at the very least often give you the chance to at least break even. Maintenance always is a net loss to play. Even if you shuffle away irrelevant cards, that doesn't change the fact that you've used 3 cards for 1 in return. This card has basically always been stone cold unplayable. It later saw a spiritual successor in the form of Bill's Maintenance, which lets you shuffle back 1 card to draw 3 new ones. Even that card was far from the most relevant, considering it was only a +1 in card advantage and counted for your single supporter card for the turn. But that mediocre card seems like a solid diamond in comparison to the losing offer that Maintenance gives you. Any marginal upside you can find in Maintenance are better provided and easier granted by countless other cards from every stage of the game's lifespan. Despite how clearly awful this card is, it's only the 4th worst card on this list, because while its payoff is bad, this card does still give the player a payoff. The last 3 cards on this list you could argue don't even offer a payoff at all. So Maintenance gets this consolation prize of being not technically worthless, even if by every metric it's one of the worst rates that Pokemon card economy has ever seen. And at number 3, we have Misty's Wish from Gym Challenge. This trainer lets you look at one of your prize cards, then ask your opponent if you may switch that card with 1 card from your hand. If your opponent accepts, and you actually do have a card in hand, you switch those cards. If your opponent declines, you return the prize card face down and draw a card instead. It's a cardinal rule in TCGs that letting your opponent pick between 2 options often greatly diminishes a card potential power. No matter how good one of the effects may be, your opponent has the agency to select the weaker of the 2 options. As we've already discussed with Gambler, cycling a card for 1 is unimpressive, and frankly not worth running in Pokemon. Your opponent can choose to make it so the card always just cycles in 1 if they really wanted to, but they honestly aren't even that pressed to usually deny you. The effects of Misty's Wish would be underwhelming even if there wasn't the chance of your opponent skirting around it. You only get to look at 1 prize card, which means you very well could see a card that you don't want. But thanks to how Misty's Wish is worded, you don't get a choice. Your opponent does. If you find a basic energy in your prize cards, you may very well be forced to get rid of one of your actually relevant cards in exchange for it. Even if you are missing a key card from your deck and you're confident that it's in your prize cards, you have to guess the right prize card, and then hope your opponent gives it to you. When compared to something like Gladion, there's absolutely no contest. It's not fair to compare Misty's Wish from a card from Crimson Invasion, but Misty's Wish never compared favorably with any cards ever from her own set. If it ever has any payoff, it's thanks to sheer luck and nothing more. More often than not, the only thing that Misty's Wish will be is simply a waste of time. And coming in at number 2, we have Lieutenant Surge's Secret Plan from Gym Challenge. This trainer card puts one card from your hand face down into your bench. You treat the card as a basic Pokemon face down, no matter what the actual card is. If attacking using a trainer card or an ability that would target it or otherwise need to know what the Pokemon is to deal damage or so on, you flip the card face up. You also flip the card up if you ever attempt to use an attack, evolve, retreat, or are affected by an attack in any way. As if that wasn't enough, you're also able to flip the card over at any time on your own turn of your own volition. When you flip the card over, if it isn't a basic Pokemon, you discard it and all cards attached to it. This card is a confusing, wordy mess that wrote a small novella just to explain all the corner case of reasons to flip a card face up. To try and condense, you're able to play a card out of your hand as a hidden Pokemon. That card can be a real Pokemon that you can set up in stealth to reveal later, or it can be a trainer card or so on and be used as a bluff. This is novel in theory, but nearly useless in practice. This isn't a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where effects can trigger upon flipping a Pokemon face up. The element of surprise provides very little benefit, besides maybe accidentally winding up against a Pokemon you have resistance to. And even that's a marginal benefit that's hardly doing anything. If Misty's wish mostly exists to waste time, Lieutenant Surge's secret plan exists solely to confuse. There's no real setups or strategies that can benefit from the smokescreen, and no mechanical benefit to be gained. Pokemon is just not the sort of game where you set up in secret and try to surprise your opponent, especially since attaching energy to the Pokemon will help narrow down potentially what sort of Pokemon you're setting up. But your opponent wouldn't have to wonder very long because it's incredibly easy to force a card face up. And if you set anything that isn't a basic Pokemon, you're just going to lose that card almost instantly the moment your opponent so much as blinks at it. All in all, Lieutenant Surge's secret plan at the absolute best is a double summon in a game where that's not all that relevant, and will sometimes just be a card that makes you discard another card. It's a baffling card that makes you wonder what the design intent was in the first place. And finally, the worst trainer card from the Gen 1 era is Mysterious Fossil. This trainer card enters play as if it were a basic Pokemon, but is an item card in every other zone. While in play, it counts as a Pokemon, has no attacks, can't retreat, and cannot have statuses. It can be knocked out, but counts as an item card again when in the trash. Anytime on your turn before you attack, you may discard Mysterious Fossil from play. The fossil that cannot attack or retreat has a whopping 10 HP, aka the lowest possible stats in the game. You frankly cannot get worse stats than that. And the fact that you can't retreat just adds insult to injury. The idea is that the cards are placeholders used to evolve into their reanimated counterparts like Kabuto. This means that if you want to play Kabutops, you need to play a 10 HP item as a Pokemon, then evolve it into a 30 HP Pokemon for a payoff of a Stage 2 Pokemon with only 60 HP. This whole evolutionary line is horrible, but the starting point is the absolute worst of it. Your opponent can pick off your Mysterious Fossil without even trying to if it ever winds up in the active zone. It's a constant liability, and the payoff is hardly worth the risk. This is true of fossil Pokemon even to this day, with recent examples having 6 times the HP, protection, and more and still not being playable. Antique Cover Fossil is infinitely more playable than Mysterious Fossil, and yet is also a pretty bad card that will never see proper competitive play. Fossil cards are among the worst trainer cards the game has ever seen, so it's only fitting that the top spot on this list goes to the first and worst of them all. Gen 1 Pokemon cards were a rougher, simpler time, and these have been perhaps the absolute extremes of how bad this game can get. Although, no matter how many years it's been, we still get cards that belong in the same club as Mysterious Fossil in terms of absolute unplayability.